Hi, welcome to Debugging with IronSpeed Visual Studio. My name's Tim Titchmarsh from .NET Architect, IronSpeed MVP Consulting Organisation. Today we're going to fire up and do a bit of debugging within IronSpeed and Visual Studio. What I have here is a small project that I've created in IronSpeed, and we're going to fire that up in Visual Studio and start doing some debugging. Okay, so what I've got here is a click event. Whenever I edit some information on the page, I want to effectively go into the click event and debug and see what's going on. So I'm clicking on the user role type edit button, and I can use the click button tab to view the information in front of me in the code window. What I find is really helpful is to use my initials or my name so that I can very easily find where I am in Visual Studio, because for big projects that can be quite a considerable bit of code. So here I've got my name, Tim T. What I'm going to do now is just build that to make sure that that's saved and Visual Studio can find it. Okay, so that worked quite nicely. Now my next step is to be able to go into Visual Studio, which I can fire up from the toolbar there. Visual Studio will load, and at the same time will load in the project completely. Again, IronSpeed is completely creating a .NET project. I can now go into the find and replace, type my name and say go and find it. Instantly it will find that initial. It takes me straight to the piece of code that I'm interested in, and okay, there it is. So this code is the same obviously as in IronSpeed, but it's now in Visual Studio. I can change it. Any changes I make in Visual Studio, don't forget, will be reflected back into IronSpeed itself. Okay, so there it is. I'm just going to now check that everything's okay. And what we're going to do is set a breakpoint. I'm going to click on the side there, or press F9 to set a breakpoint on a particular line, such that when the program hits that particular piece of code, it will stop what it's doing and Visual Studio will break. So I'm in debug mode. I've set that from the drop down. I'm going to start the debugging process, which will do a quick build first, because it's very important that the code is up to date. Visual Studio takes care of that. It does the build and compile. We can see the output there. Before it runs, you need to modify the web config for the first time. So I'm going to let Visual Studio do that for me. Click the OK button. Obviously in production you would have that set to false. You wouldn't want to be debugging on the production server. So it's now running, and obviously we expect to see a browser window come up, and so the code is running live in a browser window. Okay, and we're waiting for the user to click on that edit button, and then the breakpoint should be hit. So there's my show table page, and I'm going to go to the edit button on the row, which will then edit the information. As soon as I click the button, what will happen is Visual Studio will hit the breakpoint. And as you can see, it's highlighted in yellow, waiting for me to do something. And I can hover over there and get a tooltip showing me exactly where I am and why it stopped. So far so good. Now what I need to do is I have to step through that code line by line, or step over a piece of code, or step out back to the calling routine. I can do that from the toolbar or using the keyboard. As you see, as we move through, the yellow highlight tells us which line we're on, and if I use the mouse to hover over a variable, it very nicely displays the value of the variable for me as a tooltip. Okay, and there we are, just stepping through. As you see, the string there for the URL is quite large, so what I can do is drop it down into the watch window and view it from the watch window. We'll come back to that again in a second. So I'm stepping through, and if I'm happy with that, I can proceed or view more variables. What I've done there is to drag the me.page variable into the watch window, and now I can go through each of the properties, expand out and view each of the values in turn. It's a very powerful tool for debugging, and that information is updated on the fly. So if I change any of those variables, I would see the new change. So that's a very nice, very handy feature. Okay, and you can drill down and scroll down and effectively see every variable on the page, or in this case on the page class. So we're going to continue now. So we're now actually into the application. The first thing it's going to do though is, because it's a secure application, is going to get you to log in. It's going to just refresh the page. And what I'm going to do this time is go through again, click the edit button, again back into the breakpoint. We know where we are, we can step through using the toolbar there, and we can examine and view every piece of information just to make sure that it's running as we want. We can also, as you can see there, we have the URL string which is passed to the edit page function. Now if I go and edit this in situ, what's going to happen is that information will be saved. Okay, so that's a great way of editing information, variables on the fly. But what I've got to be careful of is if I now run that, okay, and it's incorrect, of course you could do some not damage, but you could stop the operation as it's happened there. I've corrupted that URL so the page won't load correctly. So just be careful, be aware that changes you make can cause unwanted side effects. On the other hand, of course, you may want to vary a variable for a good reason, and that's the place you can do it. Okay, well that brings us to the end of the short video on debugging. What we have got and what I have shown you there is how to view, change a variable using the watch window. Please stay tuned for more videos coming on more advanced debugging techniques, but for now it's Tim Titchmarsh from .NET Architect in the UK. Thanks for listening.